there and welcome to Gaining Vision. I'm Melanie. Have you had an opportunity to subscribe to the channel yet? If not, take a second, hit subscribe, and please don't forget to like and share. Have you ever assumed something? Maybe you assumed based on something you thought you knew, or possibly on what you saw. We all have done it in our lives, and unfortunately, it's not a good thing to do. We have to be really careful. We've all heard the saying, never judge a book by its cover, or never jump to conclusions, or my favorite, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. The reality is, humans are quick to judge, quick to assume what they think they know. And the reality is, we have to really be careful about this. So let's look at some of the examples. A lot of people assume people with disabilities can't work. A lot of people assume that people born in a certain area or raised in a certain area of the city that's poor will always live in poverty. People assume that if you haven't learned to read and write by the age of 10, you'll never do it. People assume that if you have never had a job, you can't ever work. People assume if you had one bad relationship after another, that you're never going to be happy. Where have you had assumptions in your life? Have people assumed things about you? My favorite, oh, she's blind, she can't do this. She can't do that. She can't write a book. She can't teach. She's blind. Or she only has use of one arm, so she can't drive or she can't do whatever. The reality is, just because I have a disability doesn't mean I can't do anything. It just means I do things differently. I've been guilty of assuming things about people. Sometimes I think they don't want to hear what's going on in my life because they're too busy. But in fact, they want to hear what's happening because it'll distract them from what's happening in their life. When we assume things, we miss out on opportunities. We may lose out on somebody in the workplace if we assume they can't do something just based on the way they present themselves or the way their resume looks. You may be missing out on the best employee ever. Now, of course, we would hope that people would put their best foot forward and show you the best of it, but sometimes that doesn't always happen for whatever reason it may be. We have a lot of preconceived notions that are formulated from a young age that people who are a certain way or they look a certain way won't amount to anything, or they can't do certain things. A lot of people assume women could never be in leadership roles. These preconceived notions are embedded, and that's a lot of what happens and how bad things in our society are created and evolve. Racism, sexism, ageism, ableism, all those isms are created from a preconceived notion. If you don't take the time to get to know somebody, you can never assume anything. And even once you know that person, you should never assume. So people think I'm a very positive person, which I am, but that doesn't automatically assume I'm having a great day every day. So I've heard people say, oh, I don't even bother asking you how you're doing because I know you're doing great. Why would they assume that? Just because I have a positive outlook? It's the same thing with seniors. We automatically assume at 65 they should retire. In fact, sometimes when people retire, they go downhill because they don't have a purpose anymore. Others can't wait to retire so they can travel and volunteer and do more. Sometimes when we see somebody that comes to school and they're not dressed so well, the clothes aren't clean, that they're poor, their family's poor. May not be the situation. Maybe their parent is ill and somebody wasn't there to help them out in the morning. We may see some child come with the best clothes, the best clean appearance, but we don't know what happens behind closed doors. In fact, that child could be being abused. We have to be mindful and watch the signs and have conversations and listen to one another before we assume anything. I love the saying, never judge a book by its cover, because it's so true. First appearances, first gut reactions, obviously you're going to form an opinion or a judgment. But when you get to know somebody and peel back the layers and really understand the situation, we're most likely going to be amazed at the story behind the situation. There's so many people out there that have so many amazing abilities and talents that we miss out based on assumptions. Assumptions in the workplace are critical. When you assume a team member is going to do their portion of work and they don't, you're going to lose out in the end if you haven't done yours and then be able to pull up and cover the areas that that person has let go. When you assume that other people are going to be respectful of your time and just you lose out a lot when you assume. How do we avoid assumptions? First of all, we try not to do them ourselves. Lead by example. Secondly, if you have an assumption right off the bat, take a step back, think about it, and question, is it accurate? If you may not know the answer 100%, ask the question. I love this. Oh, Melanie, I know you can't see, so how are you going to get up and do that presentation? Or how are you going to navigate the online meeting? I'm assuming you can't. Don't assume anything. I have created different ways to do things so that I'm able to do just as much as anybody else, if not more. I think a lot of people have been surprised about the amount of abilities I have despite the disability. And never assume somebody's going to come to your rescue. What I mean by that is if you have committed yourself to something and you all of a sudden last minute can't fulfill it, never assume somebody's going to jump in and save you, because you have to ask yourself, would you do that for somebody else? When you set expectations for yourself and others, make sure you can stand up to those. If somebody is making assumptions about you, stand up for yourself and clarify. It doesn't have to be rude. It could be in a very matter-of-fact way. When somebody asks me anything or assumes something because of my disability, I just gently correct them and say, actually, in fact, I can do this by doing this, this, and this. You know what? It's okay to correct and redirect somebody and to clarify their assumptions. Just like everybody assumes that somebody using a wheelchair can't walk. That's not always the situation. Or people assume that if they look physically okay, that they don't have a disability. In fact, we know, we've talked about this before, there's a lot of invisible disabilities. So ask questions, listen actively, and try your very best not to make assumptions. Because if you can start with yourself not making assumptions, then hopefully other people will watch your lead and do the same. But if an assumption is made, clarify it, but in a gentle way. Until next time, watch your assumptions. But please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and share, and we'll see you next time. See ya!